About cancellation. A new report claiming the publishing industry is hostile to gender-critical views, creating a culture that suppresses free speech and stifles debate. Campaign group Sex Matters says the environment locks people into a narrow mindset where loyalty to ideology outweighs respect for differing opinions. They argue it's not about censoring beliefs, but about protecting freedoms, fairness, and the right to work without fear of discrimination. Let's speak to the author Jenny Lindsay, poet and author of Hounded, Women, Harms and Gender Wars. Listen, Jenny, good afternoon to you.
Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. We are living in a sort of slightly bonkers place right now, aren't we? Stuff that was never, it wasn't even... In fact, we didn't have to talk about stuff sometimes because it was just obvious that, but you have friends who've got different opinions. We've all got friends that are left-wing or right-wing and some in the middle, blah, blah, blah. Nobody really cared, and then suddenly the world went absolutely mad.
Well, I think what's difficult about gender identity ideology versus gender critical thinking is that you're not talking about a difference of belief. You're talking about a difference of reality, fundamentally. In the gender critical world, we believe that women are materially definable, we're important on that basis, and that it's very ordinary for women to retain the language that we need to assert our rights, to talk about the reality of our lives. Whereas if you have gender identity beliefs, the opposite is true. And gender critical beliefs are foundationally something that must be opposed, that must be shut down.
Yeah.
So that's a very difficult bridge to gap, but it is one that this report has highlighted seriously needs attention.
Yep.
It seriously needs to be addressed. And our literary institutions, our unions, many writers themselves and activists and festivals and things like that, they simply haven't been doing what they should, which is trying to bridge a gap between
100%. And I suppose what's, without sounding too arty about this, but in the artistic world, the creative world, you would think that would be the one space where this stuff wouldn't happen because, by definition, that it's all about opinion. It's all about diversity of opinion. It's all about, views and books that challenge us. Where the hell would Socrates and Plato be, had they had to adhere to this kind of nonsense? And yet this is almost the epicenter of the problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did poison Socrates, didn't they? We're not quite at that level yet, but yes, you would think that arts would be a place where these ideas could be explored. However, the arts and academia are also the home where different ideas about gender can also be explored, and that's fine up to a point. But what has been happening in the literary arts and academia, as the report shows, and in particularly in children's publishing, is the presentation of a set of contested ideas that are not shared by the majority of the population, being presented as if they're mandatory. It's very odd being a poet and a writer in this atmosphere, because I do feel that I live in three different worlds. There's like the world of the gender identity hounders, and it's a really cruel world where people are watching everything they say. There's also the world of the women who've been hounded in this, who've all found each other and come together, and we can offer each other solace. But there is also this world, which is the reading public, who, quite frankly, when they hear about the stories, what's happened to people like Kathleen Stock or Julie Bindel or myself even, who's not a household name, they're really, really appalled by it and quite frightened. And I do feel straddled between these three worlds. I mean, what has been happening to gender critical writers, authors, editors, poets, festival directors, I mean, what this report has done is so vital, because I started getting hounded 6 years ago in the Scottish literary arts, and it was a very isolating experience, because what was happening was any institutions or literary bodies I went to for assistance would insist on making out that it was a Jenny Lindsay problem. It wasn't a systemic issue, and that is true for so many writers. We really haven't had that support that we've needed. What this report does is it shows without doubt this is a systemic problem in publishing, in festivals, in the literary culture. It's not just about an individual who said something wrong. This is a culture that is pushing one set of ideas and one set of ideas alone.
And it's a very sort of dystopian response, isn't it, to suggest that you're thinking wrongly and you're therefore you're writing and creating wrongly. I mean, who these sort of self-appointed arbiters of this? Again, something that was not controversial or even questionable 20 minutes ago, it seems. You know, suddenly people don't just have an opinion on it; they have opinions that change people's lives or careers, etc. I mean, serious stuff.
I mean, it's incredibly serious because, as the report shows, so what we're talking about here at the moment, Ian, is the secondary harms of gender identity ideology. So we're talking about the harms to people who speak about them, who I also centre in my book. I focused on what happens to women who speak out against gender identity beliefs. But those are the secondary harms of this ideology, because the primary harms are to the people like young people, who have internalized the ideology and are really struggling. And as Matilda Gosling's report really shows in such stark detail, you know, the link between the types of children's books that are being published and the writers who are then invited into schools, and the writers who are then awarded prizes. As I say, it's pushing gender identity beliefs, which are very incoherent and really confusing for a lot of children and young people. You cannot make a young person paranoid that they're gender non-conforming unless you hammer home what gender conformity is.
Correct.
And there are a lot of young people who have internalized these ideas and are really struggling. And when writers like me bring this up, we're accused of, you know, just doing that for nefarious reasons, but writers like me desperately care about what is happening.
And it does, it's pervasive, this thing. My little boy, who's 11, did ask me quite recently, is it right that there are two genders? And obviously they've been learning some stuff at school. And I genuinely, for no other reason than because we're surrounded by this sort of fog of weirdness and misinformation, I found myself pausing for a second, because there's only one answer to that, of course, and of which I eventually said to him, yes, that's correct. And, you know, happy to have the conversation with him about how some people, you know, decide to identify how they like. Couldn't care. That's fine, you know. Nobody is suggesting otherwise. I don't want to be nasty to anybody or horrible to someone. But when the other day I was reading, we're used to reading stuff like Little Britain, for example, would never get made today because of that, which is a darn shame. I saw somebody construct a piece suggesting Victoria Wood would get edited. And I thought, you know, one of our most gifted writers, comedic writers, who was just brilliant. I mean, the idea that the thought police would be coming for Victoria Wood is just bonkers. I mean, this is the sort of strange world we live in. But when you look at some of the issues that don't get discussed. We mentioned Helen Joyce receiving a book advance for her book, £20,000 book advance, Trans When Ideology Meets Reality. We had Helen on the show just earlier this week. It went on to sell 23,000 physical copies in the UK, over 100,000 internationally. Munro Bergdorf, by contrast, who's a trans identified person, received a six-figure sum for her book, Transitional, which sold 3,000 copies. And anyone with half a brain could have said, well, I think one will outsell the other, but that's not the way the publishing world looked at it.
It's really funny, actually. I mean, it's not funny. It's very, very sad. But there's a perception difference in this issue that's really quite stark. For example, the Edinburgh International Book Festival last week announced their programme, and once again, there are no gender-critical feminist writers on at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, which has a theme of repair, which is hilarious. But there are a lot of gender identity activists, such as Juno Dawson, Harry Josephine Giles, and various other people who are known to have hounded and gone after women such as myself. And in discussion on X about this, a sort of popular cultural commentator in Scotland said to the journalist Alex Massey, have you ever considered the fact that these books just don't sell? And I was sitting there knowing that these books outsell anything by
100%. 100%.
But I don't think that commentator was meaning to be snarky. He just, in his world, of course you don't book gender critical writers, and of course their books don't sell. In our world, we absolutely know that there's huge interest and quite a sort of a sense of being starved of hearing about these issues, even from people who maybe don't necessarily agree with us, but they want to know more. So it's really, yeah, the perception difference, and as you say, the financial disparities between, gender critical writers like myself getting tiny advances, and then these.
But it is that thing, when Munro Bergdorf walked into the publishing meeting that day, and obviously this person was, a successful model and all the rest of it. I get that, and fantastic, house points all round. Congratulations. Probably made a lot of money from that world. The idea, you can almost see the commissioners thinking, almost in their strange world, they hit some sort of jackpot here. Wow, we're going to publish Munro's book. And without thinking for 1 second, well, will anybody want to read this? Will there be anything in this that's going to be, that amazing? Congratulations if you get a book deal. Arguably not Munro's fault, but a book deal was forthcoming, and it was a 6-figure deal as well. Whereas Helen Joyce pitches up with a much, a deal that's worth probably a tenth of what Munro got, with a very well-researched, intelligent story and piece on the whole issue of ideology and reality. And gets none of the advance, but completely outsells the other one. But you can see those editors or commissioners looking at this thinking, I have to commission this one. This one is surely the Oracle of Delphi. This is the centre of brilliance. Munro is going to be J.K. Rowling, etc.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, no shade to Bergdorf. You don't turn down a big deal.
100%, yeah, absolutely.
I certainly wouldn't have turned down a 6-figure advance, but I did not get one. But what you'll see as well is that, writers like myself, I mean, I was very lucky, and Polity Books, who published my book, they approached me, and they'd read my writing about what had been happening to women in the gender wars and my own experience, and thought, well, that's somebody who can write a book about the true hidden cost of what's happening to gender critical women across all spheres, not just publishing. But to bring it back to publishing and to the report, yeah, I mean, that particular example is very, very stark. But then you've also got lesser known writers, perhaps, who, for example, the poet Maggie Gibson is one of the people who's on the records in the report. And I think, the fact that only 7 of us felt that we could not be anonymous when we were interviewed for the report does sort of speak volumes in itself. There's a real culture of serious fear out there. So it's not even just that, my advance is small and my life is made ridiculous. No,
it's not, exactly.
It's affecting writers that I know who really can't speak out because they have families or whatever. But it's stopping them writing what they want. Indeed. And that should be a concern.
100%. Pam Ayres never had all these problems back in the day, apparently. So, that's... maybe she needs to speak up. That's what we need. Listen, Jenny, great to have you on with us. I mean, it's a genuinely serious discussion, and I'm really grateful that you've come on. You have a very qualified view and experience on this, and lovely to have you with us. Jenny Lindsay, poet and author of Hounded, Women, Harms and the Gender Wars.